Welcome to Baron Bratwurst, where history is served one sausage at a time. If you enjoy food history, forgotten traditions, and the stories behind the world's most iconic dishes, hit like and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories find a wider audience. Now, let's uncover the remarkable history behind today's tale. The ultimate guide to California. Sausage, a delicious history in every link picture. A backyard somewhere in Sonoma on a late September afternoon. The grill grate is hot enough to make the air shimmer. Someone lays down a row of fat hand-stuffed links, and immediately the smoke starts telling a story. Roasted hatch chiles, a bright whisper of lemon zest, garlic that smells like it was pulled from the ground that morning. The casings tighten and split just slightly, sending rendered fat into the coals with a hiss. A kid reaches for one before it's ready. Nobody stops her. This is not a scene from a food magazine shoot. This is just Tuesday in a state where sausage making has roots older than the Golden Gate Bridge, shaped by shepherds, miners, ranchers, and every wave of newcomers who packed a family recipe alongside their ambitions. Most people, when they think of American sausage culture, think of Wisconsin bratwurst or Southern andouille. California rarely enters the conversation, and that's a mistake. The state's sausage tradition is one of the most varied and alive in the country, built on layers of immigrant know-how, access to produce that the rest of the nation can only envy, and a stubborn local instinct to take a classic and make it taste like the place where it was made. A link stuffed with dried apricot and fennel pollen is not a novelty act. It's the logical result of Italian butchers settling in a valley where apricot trees grew wild and fennel dusted every hillside. The history of California sausage is really the history of California itself, compressed into something you can eat with your hands. This guide is a walk through that history, from the first Old World recipes adapted in Gold Rush-era meat shops to the boundary-pushing links coming out of farmers' market stalls today. Whether you're a devoted home cook or someone who just wants to know why that sausage you ate in San Luis Obispo tasted unlike anything you'd had before, the story starts with the people who brought their traditions west and discovered a new environment that changed everything. The melting pot in a casing, California's immigrant roots. The gold rush didn't just draw fortune seekers. It drew hungry people and the people who knew how to feed them. By the early 1850s, California's population had exploded from around 15,000 non-native residents to more than 300,000 in the span of a few years. Mining camps needed protein that was portable, preserved, and calorie-dense. Sausage fit the job description perfectly. The butchers and cooks who understood curing, grinding, and casing found themselves with a captive market and a completely unfamiliar pantry. German immigrants were among the first to establish proper butcher shops in San Francisco and Sacramento. They brought recipes for bratwurst, knockwurst, and liverwurst, techniques passed through generations in Bavaria and Saxony. But the pork they found in California was not the same as what they'd left behind. Early hogs in the state were often leaner, raised on forage rather than grain, and the fat content of the meat behaved differently in the grind. Ratios had to be adjusted. Spice blends shifted to compensate. What came out the other end of the stuffer was recognizably German in spirit, but already Californian in practice. Italian immigrants followed a similar arc, especially those who settled in the coastal hills and agricultural valleys from the 1880s onward. Families from Tuscany, Calabria, and Sicily brought traditions of dry-cured salami, fresh sausages laced with fennel seed, and the instinct to use every scrap of the animal. They established small salumerie in North Beach, in the towns dotting the Sonoma and Napa corridors, and throughout the Central Valley. The pork and beef they worked with came increasingly from local ranches, and the character of the meat, shaped by the local grasses and climate, nudged the flavor profile in new directions, even when the recipes stayed nominally the same. Then there were the Basques, whose influence is less widely known, but just as significant. Basque shepherds arrived in large numbers during the late 19th century, settling across the inland valleys and high desert regions of California. They brought chorizo recipes built on smoked paprika and garlic, designed to sustain men working long days in remote grazing land. Basque boarding houses in Bakersfield, Fresno, and Los Angeles became informal culinary outposts where these sausages were served alongside lamb stews and thick soups. The chorizo adapted to what was available: local lamb instead of Iberian pork, dried peppers from nearby farms instead of imported pimenton. What united these three traditions was a common principle. Sausage making is an act of translation. You carry a recipe in your memory, you arrive somewhere new, and you rebuild it with what the land gives you. In California, the land gave generously. And once these communities had established their baseline recipes using local meat, something else started happening. The produce surrounding them, the chilies, the citrus, the stone fruit, the wild herbs growing on every hillside, began creeping into the mix, permanently reshaping what a California sausage could be. The California flavor palette, sun-drenched ingredients. That creeping infiltration of local produce into the sausage casing is what separates California's tradition from its European antecedents. In Saxony or Calabria, sausage recipes evolved around ingredients that could survive cold winters: dried juniper berries, black pepper, curing salt, maybe caraway. The herb garden was limited by frost. California flipped that constraint entirely. Here, the constraint was abundance. Consider the chile. California's growing season supports dozens of varieties, from mild Anaheims, originally cultivated in the southern part of the state in the early 1900s, to hotter serranos and the smoky complexity of dried pasilas. These weren't exotic additions for early sausage makers. They were cheap, everywhere, and intensely flavorful. A Basque chorizo recipe calling for imported pimenton could be remade with a local dried red pepper that carried its own particular sweetness and heat. A German Bratwurst built on white pepper and marjoram could absorb a roasted hatch-style chile without losing its identity, just gaining a new one. Citrus plays a subtler but equally distinctive role. Lemon and orange trees have been part of California's backyards and orchards since the Mission era. Zest from a Meyer lemon, with its floral, almost herbal brightness, found its way into Italian-style pork sausages as a natural complement to fennel. Orange zest turned up in breakfast links and in some of the sweeter, cured salamis produced in the Sacramento Delta region. These aren't garnishes. Citrus oils bind with fat during the mixing process, distributing flavor through every bite in a way that dried herbs alone cannot achieve. Then there is wine. California's winemaking regions overlap almost perfectly with its sausage-making regions, and that is not a coincidence. Red wine has long been used in European salami production as a binder and flavor agent. But California producers had access to young, fruit-forward wines that behaved differently in the casing. A splash of Zinfandel in a coarse-ground salami lends a jammy undertone that you simply will not find in a Barolo-based Italian equivalent. Some producers in Sonoma and Paso Robles have made this pairing explicit, marketing sausages alongside the specific vintages blended into them. Wild fennel, which grows along nearly every roadside and hillside in the state, deserves its own mention. Italian immigrants recognized it immediately and used it in place of cultivated fennel seed, finding the wild version more aromatic and slightly more bitter, a quality that cuts through rich pork fat with precision. The cumulative effect of all these ingredients is a sausage tradition that tastes like a specific place. Not West Coast in some vague sense, but rooted in particular soils, microclimates, and growing seasons. A sausage made with Fresno chiles, wild fennel from the marine headlands, and Dry Creek Valley Zinfandel cannot be replicated in Wisconsin or Virginia, no matter how faithfully you follow the recipe. The terroir is in the casing. As these ingredients became standard in California kitchens and butcher shops, something predictable happened. The state's dramatic geographic diversity started producing distinct regional styles, each reflecting the specific agriculture and cultural community closest at hand. From the coast to the valley, mapping regional identity, that geographic diversity is not subtle. California stretches roughly 900 miles from north to south and contains deserts, temperate rainforests, a massive interior agricultural basin, and a coastline that swings from foggy and cool to sun-blasted and dry. The idea that a single California sausage could emerge from all of this was always a fantasy. What emerged instead were regional dialects, each one shaped by the nearest fields, the nearest cultural community, and the nearest climate. Along the coast, particularly from the Bay Area up through Sonoma and Mendocino counties, sausages tend to reflect the Mediterranean sensibility that has defined Northern California cooking for decades. These are links with brighter acidity, where citrus zest, white wine, and herbs like oregano and parsley play leading roles. The proximity to cool climate vineyards and to the ocean itself encourages lighter flavor profiles. Seafood sausages appear here more naturally than anywhere else in the state, and even pork-based links lean toward garlic, lemon, and fennel rather than heavy spice. The influence of Italian, Portuguese, and Greek immigrants is especially concentrated in these coastal towns, where fishing and ranching communities kept those old-world flavor instincts alive for generations. Move inland to the Central Valley and the profile shifts dramatically. The San Joaquin and Sacramento valleys are among the most productive agricultural regions on Earth, and they are hot. Peppers thrive in that heat, from mild Anaheims to fiery Serranos, and they find their way into sausages as a matter of proximity and preference. Mexican and Central American communities have deep roots in these valley towns, and their spice traditions naturally influenced local sausage making. The result is a bolder, more assertive product. Where a coastal sausage might let fennel and citrus do the work, a valley sausage is more likely to lead with roasted chili heat, cumin, or smoked paprika. Neither style is more authentic than the other. Both are products of the same basic process, immigrants and locals working with what the land around them provided. This kind of regional pride, where a sausage could signal not just California, but a specific corner of it, created the perfect conditions for what came next. Once makers understood their local identity, the impulse to push beyond it, to borrow, blend, and experiment, became irresistible. The new era, modern fusion and creative alchemy. That impulse to experiment has become the defining characteristic of California sausage today. The regional identities still exist, but the boundaries between them have gotten porous. A maker in Oakland might start with a Portuguese linguiça base, spike it with Korean gochujang, and finish with a handful of cilantro from a backyard garden. A butcher in San Diego might fold mango and habanero into a pork link inspired equally by Mexican al pastor and Caribbean jerk. None of this reads as gimmicky because the ingredients are local, the combinations are driven by genuine flavor logic, and the people making them grew up eating at the intersection of multiple traditions. What makes this moment different from earlier waves of California sausage making is the sheer velocity of cross-pollination. Previous generations blended slowly over decades as communities lived side by side and their pantries gradually merged. Now a taqueria, a Thai restaurant, and a craft butcher shop might share the same block, and the person running the butcher shop ate at the other two last week. Flavor ideas travel faster. A smoked sausage with lemongrass and fish sauce is not a stretch when those ingredients are as common in your neighborhood as garlic and black pepper. The lack of pretension matters here. California's sausage makers, whether they work out of a professional kitchen or a home garage, tend to talk about their work in practical terms. Does it taste good on a Tuesday night with a cold beer? Does it hold up on the grill without splitting? The emphasis is on pleasure and utility, not on culinary credentials. This keeps the experimentation grounded. A sausage stuffed with sun-dried tomatoes, feta, and lamb is not a concept. It is next weekend's dinner. Restaurants and farmers' market stalls have accelerated the trend by treating sausage not as a side item, but as a featured dish worthy of the same attention given to a steak or a composed plate. That visibility has pulled more people into the craft, both as enthusiastic eaters and as curious makers. And that curiosity is the real engine of the movement. Professional chefs may lead the charge with their experiments, but the tools, the ingredients, and the knowledge required to make exceptional sausage at home have never been more accessible. A weekend project. How to embrace the California sausage movement. Embracing this tradition starts with slowing down and paying attention to where your food comes from. You do not need a commercial kitchen, a culinary degree, or even a dedicated sausage stuffer to make something worth eating. A basic hand-crank grinder, natural casings from a local butcher, and a few hours on a Saturday afternoon will get you there. The single most important step has nothing to do with technique. It is sourcing. Find a butcher who can tell you where the pork shoulder came from, or who will cut you fresh fatback instead of handing you a pre-ground tube of mystery meat. The quality of the base protein determines 90% of your outcome. Everything else is seasoning, and seasoning is where the California sensibility kicks in. Walk through a farmer's market before you plan your recipe. If the stone fruit looks perfect, consider a pork sausage with diced nectarine and a pinch of chili flake. If someone is selling bundles of fresh epizot or lemon verbena, buy them and figure out the pairing later. The whole philosophy of California sausage making is that the season dictates the recipe, not the other way around. You are not replicating a fixed formula. You are responding to what is available and good right now. A few practical notes for first-timers. Keep everything cold. Your meat, your grinder parts, even your mixing bowl should be close to freezing. Warm fat smears instead of cutting cleanly, and smeared fat makes a mushy, greasy sausage. Season a small portion and cook it in a pan before you stuff the whole batch, so you can adjust salt and spice while you still can. And do not overstuff the casings. Leave room for the links to swell during cooking without bursting. Beyond the mechanics, there is something genuinely satisfying about the process itself. Grinding, mixing, stuffing, and twisting links by hand connects you to a tradition that stretches back through every community that has shaped California's food culture, from Basque shepherds to Vietnamese immigrants to backyard grillers in the Central Valley. You are not just making dinner. You are participating in a living culinary conversation, one that has been going on for over a century and shows no sign of slowing down. Start simple. Make one batch. Grill it for friends. Then start improvising. So here's the real challenge. This weekend, skip the plastic-wrapped tubes in the supermarket cooler and walk into a local butcher shop instead. Ask what they make in-house. Ask what is in it and where it came from. You will almost certainly hear a story, maybe about a grandmother's recipe from Jalisco, or a supplier's heritage breed hogs up in Sonoma, or a seasonal batch inspired by whatever the nearby farms brought in that morning. That story is the whole point. Every great California sausage carries a small edible chapter in the state's long, sun-warmed history of people arriving with their traditions and finding new ingredients to fold into them. You do not need to become a sausage scholar or build a smokehouse in your backyard. You just need to start paying attention to what you are eating and who made it. Once you do, the supermarket mystery meat will never quite satisfy you again, and your own quiet exploration of California's most underrated food tradition will have already begun. If you love strange history, food wars, and stories that sound too insane to be real, subscribe to Baron Bratwurst.